Chapter 13. Cities of Refuge. Very clearly, the cities of refuge are an important aspect of biblical law. They are frequently mentioned in the law, Numbers 35:6, 9-34, Deuteronomy 4:41-43, 19:1-13, Exodus 21:12-14, Joshua 20:1-9, 21:13, 21 and 27, and 1 Chronicles 6:57 and 67. Basic to the fact of sanctuary is the altar, Exodus 21:14, 1 Kings 1:50-53, 2:28. Our concern with this law will be limited to its meaning for the doctrine of church and state. First, it is clear that the asylum granted was religious. It was tied to the life and death of the high priest, and it was related to the altar. The final court of justice was thus theological. The laws by which man must live come from God, and thus the last appeal in law is to the source of law. We have thus something of a superior or supreme court function here. Justification, declaring a man just or righteous, comes from the altar of atonement, and the God of the altar is the source of all law and hence of all righteousness or justice. The city of refuge said, in effect, that against the beliefs and conclusions of men, God provides an asylum or sanctuary. As a result, both freedom and justice are made central to society, in that men are made immune to the totalitarian disposition of fallen man. Second, this asylum or sanctuary applied only to the man involved in an accidental death in which he had no guilt. To escape the kinsman who sought vengeance, he was to take refuge in one of the specified cities. This refuge was his security until the death of the high priest, at which time he could leave the city. In the meantime, he was secure within the city. The sanctuary thus represented justice. Third, the elders of the city of refuge exercised a judicial function. They reviewed all the evidence concerning the death and either granted sanctuary or delivered the man to the avenger of blood, Deuteronomy 19:12, Joshua 20:4 and 5. The city of refuge thus provided a court of law, but unlike other city elders, the city of refuge had elders with an added function, judicial functions of a specialized nature. Fourth, not only were the cities of refuge located at various points in the realm to give ready access to a fleeing man, but the roads were to get particular care to allow quick access, Deuteronomy 19:3. Let us turn again to the fact that sanctuary or asylum was a religious fact. In a variety of cultures, sacred places are places of asylum. Thus, among the Aruntas of Central Australia, there was a spot near each totem centre which was sacred. Nothing there could be hurt, not even plants, let alone man. Such places of asylum existed among many North American Indian tribes. The Barotse of South Central Africa had a sacred city of refuge. Among other peoples, the temple was sacred. In Morocco, the tombs of saints and mosques offered asylum. Ancient Greece, the pagan Slavs, the ancient Irish, and others knew and observed the right of sanctuary. However, Westermarck called it, quote, obviously erroneous that places of refuge were established with a view to protecting unintentional offenders from punishment or revenge, end quote. The legal and moral purpose of God's law is thus quite different. Next, it is necessary to note that the sacredness which gave asylum belonged at times to rulers. Thus, in the Theodosian Code, we find the following. Title 44. Those persons who flee for sanctuary to the statues of the emperors. De his qui ad statuas confugent. 1. Emperors Valentinian, Theodosius, and Arcadius Augustus to Cynegius, Praetorian prefect. We suffer those persons who have been taken refuge at the statues of the emperors, either for the purpose of avoiding danger or of creating ill will, neither to be taken away by anyone before the 10th day, nor to go away of their own accord, provided that, If they had definite reasons for which they had to flee to the statues of the emperors, they shall be protected by law and the statues. But if they should be revealed to have wished to create ill will against their enemies by their own artifices, an avenging sentence shall be pronounced against them. End quote. The date of this edict is July the 6th, AD 386. It shows some influence of the biblical doctrine. It was logical that the imperial power, which earlier had been a divine power and the emperor a god, should grant sanctuary, because sanctuary is a religious fact. A few years later, the code showed a like recognition of the church as a sanctuary. Title 45. Those persons who flee for sanctuary to the churches, de his qua ad ecclesias confungunt. 1. Emperors Theodosius, Arcadius, and Honorius Augustus to Romulus, Count of the Sacred Imperial Largesses. If public debtors should suppose that they may take refuge in the churches, they shall either be dragged out of their hiding places at once, or payment of their debts shall be exacted of the bishops who are proved to have harboured them. Your eminent authority shall know, therefore, that no debtor hereafter shall be defended by clerics, or else the debt shall be paid by the clerics for a debtor who they suppose ought to be defended. Given on the 15th day before the calends of November at Constantinople, in the year of the second consulship of Arcadius Augustus and the consulship of Rufinus, October the 18th, 392. Clearly, the right of sanctuary in a church was recognized. What was denied was the right of debtors, perhaps because of exorbitant taxes, to seek that sanctuary. On February the 12th, 405, another edict granted sanctuary to all who fled from the Donatists, such as slaves who were being forced into rebaptism. Catholic churches were recognized as sanctuaries against forced conversions. In time, the right of sanctuary extended to the church grounds. In England, where as early as King Ethelbert in AD 600 sanctuary was recognized, it came in time to extend beyond the church grounds. At Beverley and Hexham, the area of sanctuary extended to a mile from the church and was marked by sanctuary crosses, some of which still stand. Under the Normans, a royal charter confirmed the English doctrine of sanctuary and allowed the refugee to, quote, abjure the realm, end quote, that is, to leave the kingdom within a specified time, and swear an oath not to return without the king's leave. In some churches, the place of sanctuary was a special seat, in others simply a door knocker. All violations of sanctuary were punishable by excommunication. England abolished the right of sanctuary by Act of Parliament in 1697. In other European countries, it ended in the 18th century, especially in the latter years. In Scotland, the right of sanctuary was abolished at the Reformation with one exception. Debtors could take refuge at Holyrood House and its precincts. This refuge did not apply to crown debtors nor to fraudulent bankrupts. After 24 hours, the debtor had to record his name at the Abbey Court to gain further protection. This condition of asylum continued through the 19th century. All too often, commentators have viewed the cities of refuge and the right of sanctuary as marks of a primitive culture. On the contrary, they had and have reference to the fact of a fallen world and the need for justice as against an evil society. The sanctuary provided a check against the sins of men and rulers, against injustice from men and the state. A most significant fact about the cities of refuge was that they were Levitical cities set aside as places of residence for the Levites, Numbers 35, 1-8. The Levites were the teachers of Israel in the things of God, Deuteronomy 33:10. It was their duty, thus, not only to teach the law, but to make the law a refuge from oppression. Biblical law is case law. The case given for the law of refuge is accidental death. If, in such cases, refuge applied, it applied all the more to cases of flagrant injustice. Not surprisingly, the Church from its earliest days recognized the fact and very early gained a recognition of it from people and rulers alike. We are told by historians that, as the power of Rome faltered, the vacuum was filled by Christian bishops. Thus, when Troyes was threatened by Attila's Huns in the middle of the 5th century, the people looked to the bishop for rescue. In time, bishops came to have armies and to defend their areas. For about 600 years, churchmen commanded this kind of authority. It was more than a vacuum that gave the bishops their power. Roman rule had become tyranny. The church represented God's law and a sanctuary against tyranny. It was this simple fact which gave church and the bishops their power and authority. Subsequently, as the church became itself an oppressor at times, authority shifted to feudal lords. With their corruption, it shifted to the Vatican, and so on. The church was a sanctuary, not merely because of its continuity with Israel, but because it represented God's law, God's justice on earth. Today, the modern state is increasingly an oppressive tyranny. Only as the church becomes the voice of God's law and a sanctuary against injustice can the power of the current tyranny be broken. There are now no cities of refuge. In 1981, a retired man seeking a place safe from crime, nuclear or other wars and violence, located an island with a remarkable record of peace and moved there. In 1982, war struck his place of refuge, the Falkland Islands. The modern state is failing. Peter Drucker has observed, quote, "I see government as obese and muscle-bound and having lost its capacity to perform. It's senile to the point of becoming incontinent, and it ought to be in diapers," end quote. The modern state has no future. If man is to have one, the church must provide it by total faithfulness to Christ our King.